ISO 27001, Annex A 514, information transfer. We're going to go through an implementation guide and we're going to have a bit of a laugh, right? We're going to look here at what the standard requires when it comes to information transfer, and really bizarrely, we're going to cover things like fax machines. Wow, modern technology. And we're going to cover how you talk to each other and how we verbally communicate, and then we're going to discard it, right? Because it's absolute nonsense. So this is ISO 27001A 514, information transfer. I'm going to go through everything that you need, all of the processes, everything you need is going to be covered in here. But let's start off with a definition. So the definition of the standard ISO 27001 Annex A 514, information transfer rules, procedures, or agreements should be in place for all types of transfer facilities within the organization and between the organization and other parties. So what we're looking at here is how we move information around, right? What are the rules? What are the processes? What are the procedures? And also, what do we do when we transfer information outside the organization to what we call third parties, right? Suppliers, third-party suppliers, customers, whoever it may be. The purpose of this particular control is to ensure that you maintain security of information as it's transferred within an organization and with any external third party. So we're going to maintain that information security, right? You know, it's a bit of a risk when we start moving it around. So we're going to look at how we can do that when it comes to the transfer of information. So we're looking at an implementation guide. The implementation, a prerequisite for this, is having an information classification scheme. We've covered it. We've covered labeling in the last tutorial. The one prior to that, we looked at classification of information. As part of classification of information, we had a handling policy, information classification and handling. So we need that. It's a prerequisite. So be sure to check out that blog if you haven't already, and let's understand about what classification of information is all about. Once you have classification, you're going to then implement rules, procedures and/or agreements to protect information in transit based on its classification and the classification scheme that you have established. So you can see it's key, get the classification scheme right. Once you have your classification scheme in place, you're going to then implement rules, procedures, agreements to protect it in transit based on that classification scheme. So you're going to establish and communicate a topic-specific policy for information transfer. You're going to implement rules, you're going to implement procedures and agreements for information transfer to protect it in transit. You're going to cover information and other associated assets in all formats. We're not just looking at digital transfer, physical transfer, document transfer, hard drive transfer, external storage transfer. Anywhere we're transferring information, that is going to be covered. And we're remembering that it can be done in many ways. So I've just covered them. So let's explore what the standard is expecting for each transfer method, right? Transfer methods here. Some of them are good, right? Some of them are good. I'm going to teach you how to deal with those. But for all of them, right, let's go through what we would expect, what the standard would expect. Implement controls proportionate to the information classification and business risk to protect against destruction, interception, unauthorized access, copying, modification. Basically, protect that information, confidentiality, integrity, availability of data. You know these, right? The three triads, the three foundations of information security. Make sure that they're protected. Put in place the ability to ensure traceability and the fancy word of non-repudiation, which includes a chain of custody while in transit. Do you know who had it, what they did with it? Can you prove it if you need to, right? So again, that's going to be based on classification, but confidential data, you know, you probably want some kind of chain of custody. Let me give you an example of that. If it goes via a courier, you want the collection receipt from the courier that shows that the courier picked it up. You want the delivery receipt from the courier that shows that the courier delivered it. You've probably got something in your process that says that the person on the other end confirms receipt of it. And there are other ways of doing it, right? Digital ways, electronic ways. But what we're looking at here is we want that traceability, that non-repudiation, right? The standard loves having owners, right? It absolutely loves having owners of stuff. So you'll have the usual suspects here. You're going to have data owners, risk owners, and all the roles and responsibilities defined that are required for the management system. Make sure that they're in. And those involved in the transfer of information should be defined along with their contact details. Right? If there's one person that's responsible for it, then make sure that you know who that person is and record it and document it. The standard loves documentation, right? Put in place who does what if there is a breach or an incident and who's going to be liable, right? If something goes wrong, Yes, we're going to have a process about what we do. Who is it? Who's going to be handling it? A standard incident management team, as bespoke individual, the information security manager. Let's have that process and understanding of what we're going to do if that data doesn't make it to where it should be. Who's going to do it? What it is that they're going to do. And we covered in 513 labeling of information. You're going to have your information labeled, right? We're not going to be sending information out there that's not labeled for classification. So make sure that your labeling is on point as well for information that's transferred. In the top trumps of requirements, right? If I had to have a top trumps of requirements about what you're going to do, the law trumps everything. So everything that you do has to meet the requirements of the law, underneath that the regulation, and underneath that your business need, right? So make sure that whatever you do meets the requirements of the law. Set out your guidelines on storage and deletion of business records and messages. We're going to cover that in data retention, but you're going to need to make sure you know what you're doing, you know, as part of that transfer. How long are they having it for? What are they going to do with it when they finish with it? How are they going to get rid of it? How are they going to prove to you that they've got rid of it? So let's have a look at some rules and guidelines around that now as we're starting to build up this particular process, and ensure the availability of the transfer service. Okay, this is about making sure that whether or not it's electronic transfer service, that it's available and reliable, whether or not you're using a courier, that it's a reliable courier, but you want to make sure that that service is available to you. Okay, we're going to go through some transfer methods and I'm going to give you some guidance on them, right? So let's start off with a couple of these. Extra things that you need for these ones are detect and protect against malware and viruses, right? We need to make sure that we're detecting and protecting against them. If you use attachments, we're making sure that we protect the attachments that we have. When you send something to someone, make sure it is the correct someone. Don't send it to somebody who has a similar email address or somebody who is in your address book. If you simply must use public means like instant messaging or whatever it may be, get approval first. Don't just be banging it out there. Don't make that core and part of your core process. And put in place some strong measures and strict authentication, right? Think about compensating controls if you've got to go that route. And tell people not to message or SMS critical information. You can tell them, they won't listen, and no one can check as they are private. Still, we're going to tell them, right? Okay, transfer methods. First one, fax machines. Yes, okay, some of you have got fax machines. Some of you, I don't know, some of you still in the 1980s, 1990s. I mean, what the actual, right? WTF. But people use them, right? So the standard is nice and vague about advising people of the problems of using them. It doesn't really give you a lot of guidance. It tends to give you guidance on things that it understands. It doesn't understand fax machines. So it admits the fact that the main problem is that this is not 1987 and still people, but it still tells people that there might be a problem apparently. The actual reality is if you use them, then you are controlling them through risk management and compensating controls. What would I do here? I don't know. I'd probably have the fax machine in an area that wasn't easily accessible, wasn't publicly accessible. You know, I'd make sure that the fax machine was cleared down regularly. You know, if you could add some kind of a PIN to it so that people had to have PIN authentication to it. You know, common sense things that you might want to put in around those fax machines. But I would say probably in this day and age, just don't have them, right? I mean, why? Next one is physical storage media transfers. So we're going to move some physical media or paper about the place, right? Something's going to get moved around the place. If you must, you must. But what are you going to do if you do? Well, someone needs to be assigned responsibility for notifying that it'll happen, making it happen, and getting receipt that it happened. Nice work if you can get it, right? So it's about documentation of process, non-repudiation, making sure that every step of that process has a record associated with it. For physical storage media transfers, we're going to send it to the right person in the right way. Right? Nothing stops a thief like a package. So packaging is covered. It talks about packaging. Packaging has its place. Think Amazon, but package that bad boy before you send it. The standard is providing you the guidance. Package it. Nice. I'm not a fan of every per se, but then it's not my call and other couriers are available. So you need to have an agreed list of couriers. The standard says of reliable couriers. Again, okay, how many couriers do we know are reliable in the great scheme of things? It's hilarious, right? But just have a list, right? Just have a list of the least. Right? He wants you to have courier identification standards, which is vague, right? I mean, what does that mean? It means pick mainstream ones and you should be okay, right? Or you could try asking, are you a courier before handing over the priceless data? And if the answer is yes, then I think you're golden, right? I mean, this is clearly just choose couriers that you know and you can trust, right? Don't just hand it over to some person who comes into the reception and says, I'm here to collect the data, right, in a high-vis jacket or in a high-vis vest. Put your processes in, put your procedures in, have your couriers that you trust, and log absolutely everything. Now, verbal transfers, oh my sweet God, right? The 2022 update looks at verbal transfers. I mean, how they're going to audit this, I have absolutely no idea, right? It likes to give you things. It likes to, I don't know, maybe we're in the realms of the thought police, right? I wish you Godspeed with this one, but let's look at what the standard believes that people will do. Actually believes that you're going to do it, right? No confidential chit chats in public places, right? I mean, it's guidance, right? This is good, sensible guidance for you to communicate to people. As I say, auditable, maybe not. No answer machine message with that confidential data on it, right? This is guidance. This is what it's guiding you, right? Hi, this is Stuart. I'm not available right now, so please leave your confidential data after the beep. Screen people to the appropriate level to listen to the conversation. I mean, okay, you know, you can try that. Screen people to the appropriate level to listen to your conversation. Fine. Have room controls in place like soundproofing, right? 50 Shades of Grey territory, right? Make sure that nobody can hear you scream, right? When you go through that confidential one-to-one and asking for a pay rise. But it wants you to consider it. And any sensitive conversation should begin with a disclaimer. Could you imagine that, right? A disclaimer. We're just about to have a sensible and very sensitive conversation. Here is the disclaimer I've just got to read from our legal department. I mean, give it a go, give it a try. Good luck with it. You got the guidance, right? That's the kind of things that it wants you to do. Be sensible about it, right? Just be sensible about it. So, what are the three transfer methods that are now covered, right? The three transfer methods that it actually covers are electronic, physical, and verbal, right? They're your three transfer methods. You've got your guidance on that. How are you going to comply with that? You're going to get yourself a topic-specific policy. You're going to communicate it, make sure people are aware of it, implement your classification scheme, define and implement your procedures, rules, and agreements on transfer, communicate and make sure people follow those processes and procedures and rules and agreement. The auditor, they're going to come and check you, right? What kind of things that you're going to check if I was an auditor? Probably number one is that you haven't done something stupid, right? The auditor is going to check rules, procedures, agreements, etc. So document everything, have evidence for everything, you know, physical transfer logs, media logs, risk register items, evidences of training, work through the transfer types, look for the gotchas, sure you use a courier, did you agree it, and have you listed them somewhere? You know, you start every conversation with a disclaimer, clearly, and now for shits and giggles, the auditor would like to see you demonstrate that. They probably wouldn't. I mean, you could, right? I mean, you could say to the auditor at the beginning of the audit, yeah, that's just my facetiousness, right? What else are you going to look at? Number two, that you have rules, processes, agreements, and you've followed them, and you've trained people, right? And then they're looking at your documentation. So common mistakes that people make. Number one, your teams go around you and do whatever they want because your controls make their life a living hell. Right? People will go around you. If you put information transfer rules in place that are so strict that people can't operate within them in a high moving dynamic organization, they'll just go around you, right? So it's okay to have these rules and procedures, but you know, they're going to email it on Hotmail or WhatsApps or whatever it may be, right? They are going to go around you. So what I would do here is be practical and realistic in what you put in place. No one likes a smart ass, but they hate people who make their job more difficult way more. So if you make it too hard, they'll go around you, and you've got zero way to check, right? You've got no way of checking that. You can't audit that. You can't impose private conversation checks. You can't go through private communications, you know, so it just isn't realistic. So just don't be a dick, right? Be someone who takes the spirit of what is required and implements it with reasoned appropriateness. You know, put some controls in place, put some exception steps in place so that people can do what they need to do in exceptional circumstances, even if it's seeking the approval of a manager from somewhere to do it and keeping a record of it, right? Don't just say they can't do it, give them a way that they can do it in those exceptional circumstances. This is a risk-based management system, not a rule-based management system. Controls are for consideration, right? These are going to be implemented to a level appropriate to you. Honestly, if you stop people doing their work, they will just go around you. Number two mistake, no, one or more members of the team haven't done what they should do. Okay, just check that everybody knows what they should be doing. Check that if they're going to evidence a process, that process meets the requirements of what you've written down. You know, just make sure come the audit, that you are absolutely solid and golden, and make sure all your documentation and version control is up to date. So that is about information transfer. Think about the spirit of what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to protect that information as it moves around within the organization and externally. We're going to make sure that we put appropriate controls in that people can follow, that meet the risks that we've got. We're not going to make people's life a living hell. And ideally, we're going to have documents and evidences of every stage and every step of the process so that we can justify the non-repudiation. We know exactly where that data is and what that data was. So I'm Stuart Barker, I'm still the ISO 27001 Ninja. We're going to go through some more tutorials. Be sure to like, subscribe, do the business below, and join me on the next tutorial. Peace out.